The sound coming from behind the wall was the first. Initially quiet, then too steady to be ignored. A gentle thump, laughter, and then a rhythm that stopped us both in our tracks. He was waiting for me to act as though I hadn't heard it. However, I didn't. Something changed when I looked him in the eye instead. Permission, curiosity, and possibly the beginning of a dare. The atmosphere between us was already electrified by the time the lights went out, and neither of us did anything to halt the knock when it arrived. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to this video before we start. It keeps you here for the next one and helps more than you could imagine. I appreciate you being here. Let's begin now. It was quieter than we had anticipated on our first night at the lodge. By the time we carried our things inside, the snow had already begun to fall. Quiet, steady, and muffling all sounds outside the windows. The fire in the corner roared loudly enough to drown out the silence between us, and the air had a subtle scent of pine and aged wood. Since supper we hadn't spoken. Perhaps we were simply exhausted, or settling into that comfortable rhythm of a pair who didn't require light conversation to pass the time, rather than because something was amiss. With a mug of something warm in my hands, I nestled up behind the throw blanket and listened to the wind hitting the glass. Then I heard it. It was dim at first. It might have been the fire shifting or the flooring. However, a brief outburst of laughter followed. Not ours. He raised his head from his phone. "Have you heard that?" I gave a nod. Next door. The walls were flimsy, as we both knew. The woman at check-in smiled and apologized, saying the building had a wonderfully acoustic sound. It sounded like a joke at the moment. It sounded more like an invitation now. After a few seconds, the noise resumed. This time, closer. Muffled but distinct laughter. Then a silence. The type that seems lengthier than it actually is. The kind that fills in the blanks just enough for your imagination to do. Over the rim of his drink, he looked directly into my eyes. We both remained silent for a while. Then it began slowly, rhythmically, and unmistakably. My body became motionless, not tense or scared, just conscious. I could tell my husband was listening, even though his countenance was unreadable as he reclined back on the couch. His fingers lightly tapped the side of his glass, yet it was not an issue. I said nothing at all. I didn't have to. Although they weren't loud, the sounds were consistent. A shifting creak of the bed frame and a gentle thud against the wall. The kind of beat that is impossible to unhear once you hear it. A gasp, a faint whisper, and what could have been a name. My heartbeat sped up, but not because I was shocked or embarrassed. Something else was involved. He moved next to me. Without even looking, I could feel the weight of his gaze. He was expecting for me to say something like, "It's awkward," roll my eyes, or propose we turn up the TV. However, I didn't. Rather, I grabbed the blanket that was between us and raised it so that it would rest on both of our legs. His hand grazed mine beneath the cloth. It wasn't moved by him. The fire crackled. Behind the wall, the beat slowed and then became more intense. Now I could hear it. Not only the motion but also the breathing that goes along with it. It filled the space between them and now between us with its intimacy. He let out a slow sigh through his nostrils. No words yet. I pretended not to notice how my thighs had clenched and how my skin felt little too warm for how cold the room had been previously while remaining silent and watching the flames flicker. With his arms slung across the top of the couch and his fingertips brushing my shoulder, he leaned back. Not possessive, not even intentional, simply conscious. I didn't retreat. Together we sat in silence while listening to something unexpected and pretending, for the moment, that it didn't affect us in any way. The following day, the storm was more intense. By late afternoon, the wind had grown piercing and was rattling the lodge's ancient wooden frame as thick snow piled against the windows. We continued to read, nibble on leftovers, and move around one another in low voices. Although neither of us brought up the previous evening, our stillness wasn't typical. It felt like glass, stretched thin and hanging. Every look lingered longer than was required. There was weight in every brush of skin. Around 6, the personnel knocked to warn us that the power would cut off. The woman smiled as she said, "It happens sometimes. However, there is wine and the fireplace lounge remains lit." It was nearly humorous. Nearly. It wasn't until after 8 o'clock that we started to take it seriously. First, the heater shut off. Then, one by one, the above lights went out, leaving the cabin in a deep, buzzing quiet. The fireplace was the only source of light, casting flickering shadows across the floor. "Well," I replied, putting down my book. "I guess that's our cue," he said as he stood slowly and extended his arms above his head. "Will we be entering the main room?" I put on a heavy cardigan and wrapped it tightly about myself as I nodded. Only battery sconces and the amber trail of light that led to the shared lounge illuminated the dark hallway outside. I could already hear warm, informal, low voices before I heard hers. At the corner, we stopped. The adjacent pair was already there, snuggling up on the low sofas by the fire and sharing a glass while giggling gently. As we walked in, the woman looked up, her face open and expectant, as if she had anticipated our arrival. I instantly recognized her chuckle. We had heard the same one via the wall. She pointed to the cushions across from them as she moved slightly to provide space, tucking her legs under her. She remarked as if we were old acquaintances that the power always goes out once or twice a season. "There's a reason they keep extra wine back here." With a smile, her partner raised the bottle. "Take care of yourself." I gave my hubby a quick look. His shoulders were taut, but his face was impassive as he nodded the tiniest. I was the first to move forward. We took a seat across from them so that we could feel the heat without getting too near. The way it moved across her cheekbones and how warm it seemed. She appeared to have taken a shower right before the lights went off, since her hair was a little wet at the ends. She neglected to fix her sweater when it slipped off one shoulder a little. I averted my gaze, but not quickly enough to avoid her seeing. For a little while we chatted like regular people about our origins, how we got to the mountains, and how early the snow had arrived this year. Bree and Carson were their names. I kept it in mind. The initial remark was made by Carson. He grinned and added more wine to our cups, saying, "I apologize if we were a bit noisy last night. The walls here aren't exactly private." My spouse made a little frightened sound that attempted to be a giggle when he coughed. I didn't avoid her gaze, but he didn't avoid mine. I gave my head a small tilt. I found it endearing. Bree grinned more broadly. "You failed to knock." I stared at her for too long. "No," I answered quietly. "We didn't." After raising an eyebrow at her, Carson turned to face the rest of us. There was a conversation among the four of us that didn't require words. The moment was loaded, weightless, and stretched. My hubby moved next to me. "We weren't sure if it was intentional," Bree said in a playful yet nuanced voice. He nodded, his attention instantly drawn to his glass's rim. She faced me once again. Would it have mattered? I didn't respond. I simply sipped from my glass and allowed the warmth to fill my chest. The fire broke out. The storm persisted outside. The silence inside wasn't empty anymore, but nobody expressed what we were all thinking. Everything was in bronze and shade as the firelight faded to a low flicker. The room was now warm from sources other than the flames, the pillows were strewn about, and the wine had been forgotten. I was first lowered by Carson. With quiet assurance, he placed one hand at my waist and used the curve of my neck to guide me back. Somewhere behind us, my sweater had already disappeared, and when he sat over me, I could feel the steady, hard warmth of his chest against mine. Bree straddled my hubby over the fire. Her palms were flat on his chest as her hips rolled slowly. I observed how his hands moved up her back. He leaned in close to her. How, despite her movements, his gaze remained fixed on mine. I had the impression that I was observing myself from a distance, as if I was simultaneously in both locations. Carson's lips moved from my jaw to my neck. As I let out a breath, his hold tightened, causing my body to move beneath him and my legs to automatically split to allow for the pressure of his hips. He kept his mouth hovering over my ear. "He's observing you," he said. "Keep going." I didn't. My hips shifted in sync with his present. Slow and methodical, echoing her rather than matching the air. Our mutual symmetry grew stronger. It was almost lovely for a second. Bree turned her head after 2 rhythms, 1 shared breath and bodies. Our gazes met. From my husband's lap, she rose in 1 smooth motion. Her body was relaxed but assured. The rug was lightly padded by her bare feet. Then she was above me, kneeling next to Carson, her breath evident in the firelight, her hair streaming forward. She didn't inquire. She simply reached for my hand, lifted it tenderly, and planted a kiss on the inside of my wrist. Carson gave her enough space to crawl between us. Her body hovered above mine with practiced ease as her hands settled on each side of my shoulders and her knees pinged my. "You're warm," she muttered. Her mouth then dropped to my collarbone. Her breath was more delicate and softer than Carson's, yet it was still intentional. Even though her lips hardly brushed my skin, the impact was felt right away. My head dropped back. Blindly, I grabbed for the blanket's edge underneath us. Carson's hands came back, aiming at my hips this time. He held me firmly in position while moving behind me, staying close and still contributing to the beat, his chest gliding over the backs of my legs. Now that her knees were moving between mine and her torso was flush with mine, Bree shoved her entire body on mine. Carson's grip pushed me up into both of them as I gasped, and her hands became tangled in my hair, keeping me steady. I was immobile. I had no desire to. I then sensed him, my spouse's hand slipping under my shoulder, his lips close to my ear. His breath was erratic and ragged. He said, "I need to see you." He knelt next to me, running his fingers over my hip bone and his hand down my thigh. Bree turned a little and bent her head to kiss my shoulder while leading him with one hand. Behind me, Carson let out a faint moan. I felt him adjust as his weight shifted once more. He never took his hands off of me. Now every part of me was touched. Carson's chest against mine, the breath of the breeze against my throat. My spouse's mouth is close to mine. The pressure made my legs shake. Everywhere they touched, my flesh burned. I had lost my mind. Although nobody hurried, things moved more quickly. Bree kissed me slowly at first, then more deeply, her hands cupping my jaw. My husband's breath shuddered against my skin as he simultaneously kissed my neck. With a firm grip, Carson dragged me closer to his lap, keeping me steady as the pace intensified. They all 3 moved through me, with me, and around me. Instinctively, I arched my body, rising my back off the rug and rolling my hips upward. Bree's lips swept over my chest. She moved against me with the assistance of my husband's hand that passed through hers. Carson's moan was now more intense and nearly shattered. I was having trouble breathing. My fingers dug into the first object I came across as my hands mindlessly moved across my arms and shoulders. I had no idea who I was clutching. All I knew was that I couldn't let go. Something was whispered. There was a gasp. Someone swore. The action continued. It expanded. The rhythm alternated between layering, staggering, and matching. Mouths at every turn, skin against skin, and breath entangled in breath. I had Bree's hair all over me. My hips were pulled upward by Carson's hold. My husband kissed me again, more forcefully this time, his entire body leaning into it as his fingers curled under my chin, tilting my face toward his. My chest rose, my thighs trembled, and my back arched. Bree restrained my wrists. I was drawn.